I used to think I knew the sound of every version of Oliver, the quick three-beat knock he did on my apartment door when we were still new and nervous, the way he hummed off key in the shower, like he was testing whether the day would let him get away with joy. The sigh he made when he settled into the couch beside me, his shoulder touching mine with the casual certainty of someone who'd decided, quietly and completely, that I was home. But there was one sound I didn't recognize until the night it changed everything. A zipper, slow and careful, not the impatient kind that says I'm late, but the kind that says I'm scared I'll be heard. It was early March, and Chicago was doing that thing where winter axe offended you thought it was leaving. The wind had teeth. The radiators in our place clanked like they were arguing with each other. Oliver had been unusually silent all evening, wandering from room to room like he was looking for something he'd misplaced inside his own skin. We'd been together almost 7 years. That number sat between us sometimes, heavy and quiet, proof of endurance, proof of love, proof, if I was honest, of all the conversations we'd managed to postpone until they calcified into later. "Do you want tea?" I asked from the kitchen, holding up the kettle like it could solve anything. Oliver hovered in the doorway, hands shoved in the pockets of his sweatshirt. His hair was still damp from a shower he'd taken too early, like he needed a reset but didn't know which button to press. "Sure," he said, but his voice did that thin thing it did when he was trying not to be noticeable. I filled 2 mugs, the kind with tiny chips along the rim from years of being clinked together like a private toast. Chamomile for him, because he said it tasted like sleep pretending to be a drink. Peppermint for me, because it made the air feel cleaner. When I turned back, he was no longer in the doorway. The apartment was small enough that disappearing took effort. I listened. The TV wasn't on. The fridge hummed. Outside, a car slid on slush and someone honked like they were insulted by physics. Then I heard it again. The zipper. Oliver's closet. I stood there with 2 steaming mugs and a sudden sharp awareness of my own heartbeat. My first thought was stupid and automatic. Is he hiding something from me? And then my second thought was worse. Of course he is. Haven't we both been doing that? I carried the mugs to the living room, set them down, and waited. The waiting wasn't dramatic. It was just still, like the air was holding its breath with me. A minute passed. 2. I stared at the framed photo on the bookshelf. Our first trip to Lake Michigan in summer. Oliver grinning like he'd been born under sunlight. Me squinting and laughing because the wind had stolen my hat. We looked like people who assumed the future would just unfold naturally, like a flower. The bedroom door opened. Oliver stepped out. For a second, my brain refused to name what my eyes were seeing, because naming felt like making it real. He was wearing a black skirt, knee-length, the kind that swayed a little when he moved, and a soft cream sweater that looked like it had been stolen from a gentler universe. His legs were bare and pale. On his feet were flats, simple and plain, but he stood in them like they were a cliff edge. His face was still Oliver. Same careful brows, same mouth that always looked like it was on the verge of a joke. But there was mascara, lightly done, and a hint of something on his lips, not quite lipstick, more like a tinted balm. His hair was brushed differently, a little softer around his forehead. He held his hands up like someone approaching a strange dog. "Lisa," he said, and my name trembled in his mouth. I realized I'd frozen with my hands clenched on the back of the armchair. "Hey," I managed, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. He didn't move closer. He stayed by the hallway, half in shadow, half in lamplight. The skirt caught that light, and it made him look delicate, in a way that cracked something open in me. Not delicate like fragile, delicate like precise, like he'd finally chosen something that fit. "I need you to not say anything for a second," he said quickly. Just let me get it out." My throat tightened. "Okay." He took a breath so deep his shoulders lifted. "I've been cross-dressing. For a long time." The words landed in the room like a book dropped on a table. Solid, undeniable. I swallowed. "How long?" His eyes glistened, which startled me more than the skirt. Oliver didn't cry easily. He was the kind of man who got quiet, who took things apart and reassembled them privately. Since I was a teenager, he admitted. Before I met you. But I stopped when we started dating, or I tried to. I thought I could. I thought it was just a phase, or a weird thing I did when I was stressed. And then it kept coming back. He laughed once, bitter and small, like a song you can't get out of your head except the song is you. I didn't know where to put my hands. I didn't know whether to stand up or stay seated. I didn't know if he wanted me to come closer, or if closeness would feel like interrogation. So I did the only thing that felt safe. I stayed where I was and made my voice as steady as I could. Why didn't you tell me? Oliver's gaze flicked to the mugs on the coffee table, like he couldn't believe something as normal as tea could exist in this moment. I was scared, he said, and his shoulders sagged with the honesty of it. I was scared you'd think I was... He shook his head. I don't even know what I thought you'd think. That I was lying about being a man. That I was perverted. That I was secretly gay. That you'd leave. I flinched at that last word. Not because it was offensive, because it was familiar. I wouldn't... I started, but my voice cracked. I stopped and tried again. I'm here. He nodded like he'd heard the words but didn't trust them yet. I found the skirt at a thrift store, he blurted, like he couldn't bear the silence between us. I told myself it was just to see if it still made me feel calmer. And it did. It does. He looked down at himself, then back up at me with an expression that was almost pleading. This isn't all the time. I don't want to change my name or... He hesitated, careful, like he was stepping through a field of invisible mines. I don't know what it means. I just know it's real. And I'm tired of feeling like I'm hiding contraband in my own house. Something in my chest ached, sharp and immediate. Contraband, like joy was illegal. I stood up slowly. The floorboard creaked and Oliver's whole body tensed. It wasn't just fear of rejection. It was fear of being witnessed. I walked toward him, but I stopped a few feet away, giving him space. Can I ask questions? He nodded once, hard. How often? I asked softly. He let out a breath. More than I admitted to myself. Sometimes once a month. Sometimes I'll go 2 months and feel okay, and then it hits me like a craving. I'll wait until you're asleep, or I'll do it when you're out. His face tightened with shame. I hate that I made it a secret. I thought of all the nights he'd said he was just restless and gone to the living room alone. All the times he'd seemed distant in the morning, like he'd spent the night fighting something. I'd assumed it was work stress, or anxiety, or the vague weight of adulthood. I'd assumed because assuming was easier than asking. I'm not mad, I said, surprising myself with the certainty of it. I searched for the word and found it lodged under fear. I'm sad you were alone with it. Oliver's eyes went wide, then his face crumpled in a way that made my heart lurch. He covered his mouth with his hand, and the mascara made his lashes darker, the tears gathering at the edges like he'd been storing them for years. I didn't want to put it on you, he whispered. I didn't want to make it your problem. I felt something shift in me then, something old and stubborn. The story we tell ourselves about love is that it's made of grand gestures and anniversaries and matching toothbrushes. But the real proof is whether you'll let someone hand you their fear without dropping it. I'm your girlfriend, I said. Your partner. If it matters to you, it matters to me. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Then, quieter, he said, I don't even know if I'm allowed to want this. I was taught. Men don't do this. Men don't get to want softness. Men don't get to want to feel pretty. Pretty? The word made my throat tighten again. Not because it was wrong, because it sounded like permission. I looked at him, really looked, and saw Oliver the way I'd somehow avoided seeing him. Not as a fixed thing, not as the role he played so well, but as a person constantly negotiating with the world. You're allowed, I said simply. He blinked at me. You're not. This doesn't. It doesn't make me love you less, I interrupted, and my voice finally found its strength. It doesn't make you less you. A small tremor ran through him, like his body was trying to decide whether to believe me. And then the conversation took the turn that surprised both of us. Oliver exhaled shakily and said, I think. I think I'm telling you this now because I can't keep avoiding it, but also because I keep feeling like we've been avoiding other things too. My stomach dropped because I knew exactly what he meant, and I hated how quickly I knew. We'd been skirting the edges of certain topics for years. Why sex sometimes felt like a negotiation instead of a shared language. Why we defaulted to fine when we weren't. Why I'd started to dread the question, are you okay? Because it always led to nothing. I crossed my arms, not defensively, but because my body needed something to hold on to. Like what? Oliver looked past me toward the window, the glass reflecting his silhouette in the dark. His voice went softer, like how we stopped being honest about what we want. The word we hit me, and with it came the defensive reflex I'd perfected. I'm doing my best. But Oliver wasn't accusing. He was offering a hand into the place we both avoided. I sat back down on the edge of the couch because my legs felt unsteady. Okay, I said. Let's talk. He stood there for a moment longer, then slowly walked to the armchair opposite me and sat, smoothing the skirt over his thighs with a care that felt intimate in a new way, like he was claiming his own body without apology. He took the chamomile mug I'd made him earlier. His hand shook enough that the tea rippled. I think, he began, then stopped. He stared at the steam like it might spell the right words. I think I've been afraid that you only love the version of me that's easy. My first instinct was to protest. But if the last 7 years had taught me anything, it was that protest without listening is just another kind of silence. So I asked, what's the version of you that isn't easy? Oliver's mouth twisted. The one that needs things. The one that wants to be held without being strong. The one that wants to explore what masculinity means to him without feeling like he's failing at it. My heart squeezed. I didn't know you thought you had to be strong all the time. He let out a humorless breath. I didn't either. Not until I started feeling like I couldn't breathe. There was a long pause. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor's music thumped faintly through the wall like a distant heartbeat. Then Oliver said very quietly, and I think you've been afraid too. I stared at him. Afraid of what? His gaze met mine, steady now in a way that felt braver than any performance of confidence. Afraid that if you admit you want something different, you'll lose what we have. It was like he'd reached into my chest and named the thing I'd been hiding even from myself. Because yes, because I'd been carrying my own contraband. For years, I'd worn my role as the supportive girlfriend, like armor, competent, understanding, low maintenance. I'd told myself that love was compromise, and compromise meant swallowing the parts of me that wanted more tenderness, more curiosity, more play. It meant pretending I didn't notice how I was always the one smoothing things over, how I became the emotional manager of our life, how my own needs started to feel embarrassing, like asking for too much. I tried to speak, but what came out was a whisper. I don't know how to say what I want without sounding ungrateful. Oliver's eyes softened. Try. So I did because the room had already changed, and there was no going back to the old version of us where we pretended we were fine. I want to feel chosen, I said, surprised by the simplicity of it. Not assumed. I want us to stop coasting. I want us to talk about things before they become emergencies. Oliver nodded slowly, like he was absorbing each word and placing it somewhere careful. I'm sorry, he said, and the apology wasn't dramatic. It was specific. It landed. I blinked hard. I'm sorry, too, I admitted. I'm sorry I didn't ask you the right questions. I'm sorry I let us turn into roommates sometimes. That confession tasted like metal, like truth. Oliver's lips parted, and for a moment he looked younger, like the boy he'd been when he first discovered that softness could bring him peace, and then learned the world would punish him for it. "I didn't tell you because I thought it would ruin everything," he said. "And I didn't push because I thought it would," I said back. We stared at each other, and the pattern was suddenly so obvious, it made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. We'd been treating honesty like a threat instead of a foundation. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Okay," I said. "So, the cross-dressing. What do you need from me?" Oliver's shoulders rose and fell, as if he hadn't expected the question to be that practical. "I don't need you to be into it," he said quickly. "I mean, if you are, great, but that's not—" He fumbled, cheeks reddening. "I need you to know. I need to not be ashamed in my own home. I need to be able to say, 'Tonight I want to wear this,' and not feel like I'm confessing to a crime." My chest ached again, but this time it was warm, because what he wanted wasn't complicated. It was intimacy, the kind that looks like being seen without flinching. "I can do that," I said. He swallowed. "And I need you to tell me if it makes you uncomfortable. Not in a way that punishes me. Just honestly. So I don't fill in the blanks with my worst fears." I nodded. "Deal." Oliver's eyes shone, and he hesitated, then forced the words out like he was lifting something heavy. Maybe I want to explore it more. Not just in secret at night. Maybe I want to go somewhere, like a store, try things on, and I'm terrified of what people will think." The image of him alone in a thrift store, pretending he was shopping for someone else, made my stomach twist. "We could go together," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Not tomorrow, not if that's too fast, but when you're ready." Oliver stared at me like I'd just offered him oxygen. "You'd do that?" he whispered. "Yes," I said, and then, because truth was contagious tonight, I added, "And I want you to know something too." His brows knit. "What?" I took a breath. "I've been lonely sometimes. Not because you're a bad boyfriend, but because I stopped telling you when I needed more. I stopped asking for the kind of affection I actually like. I started performing easy the same way you've been performing normal." Oliver's mouth opened, then closed. He looked stunned, like he'd assumed my silence meant satisfaction. "I didn't realize," he said softly. "I didn't realize either," I admitted. "Not fully. I thought if I asked for more, I'd be asking you to be someone you're not. But tonight I'm realizing we've both been doing that, assuming the other person can't handle the truth." Oliver set his mug down carefully, like he couldn't trust his hands. "What does more look like?" he asked. My eyes filled, which embarrassed me even though it shouldn't have. "It looks like you initiating affection sometimes, instead of waiting for me to ask," I said. "It looks like us having real check-ins instead of letting weeks blur. It looks like me admitting I want to feel desired and not just appreciated." Oliver nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, like he was memorizing the shape of my needs. "Okay, I can do that. I want to." A silence settled between us, but it wasn't the old silence made of avoidance. It was the kind that follows a truth spoken aloud, the kind that gives you room to breathe. Oliver glanced down at his skirt again, then back up. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Anything. Do I look ridiculous?" The question was so raw, so human, that my chest tightened hard. "No," I said immediately. Then I softened it, because he deserved more than reassurance. He deserved a real answer. I let my eyes trace him, his careful outfit, the way the sweater sat on his shoulders, the nervous line of his jaw. "You look like you," I said. "Like a version of you that's been waiting." Oliver's breath hitched. "I don't know what that means, but it feels good." I stood up again, and this time he didn't tense. I moved closer until I was standing in front of him. I hesitated, then asked, "Can I hug you?" His eyes widened. He nodded, quick. When I wrapped my arms around him, he clung to me like he'd been holding himself upright for years and had finally been given permission to lean. His cheek pressed against my shoulder. I could smell his shampoo and the faint laundry detergent on the sweater. His body shook once, then steadied. "I'm sorry," he murmured into my hair. "Me too," I whispered. We stayed like that for a long time. The radiator clanked. The city outside kept being itself. But inside our small living room, something old loosened. Eventually, Oliver pulled back just enough to look at me. His mascara had smudged slightly under one eye, giving him a tender, undone look that made my heart twist with affection. "So what now?" he asked. I exhaled slowly. "Now we learn how to talk," I said. "Like we should have years ago." Oliver gave a shaky laugh. "We're really doing this." "We're really doing this," I confirmed. He glanced toward the bedroom. "I have other things," he admitted. "Not like—" He waved his hand, flustered. "Not sex things. Just clothes, a couple dresses, a wig I bought once and then panicked and hid. It's all in a box in the back of the closet." "A box," I repeated gently. He winced. "I know." "We can bring it out," I said. "Not all at once, but it doesn't have to live like a secret." Oliver stared at me, and something in his face shifted. Relief, yes, but also grief. The grief of all the nights he'd been alone with that box. "I wish I'd told you sooner," he said. "Me too," I admitted. "But we're here now, and we can decide what sooner looks like going forward." He nodded, absorbing that. I picked up his mug and took a sip of my peppermint tea, mostly to give my hands something to do. "Can I be honest about one more thing?" I asked. Oliver's expression turned attentive, like he was ready now, truly ready to hear me. "I'm scared too," I said. "Not scared of you, scared of change, scared of getting it wrong, scared of hurting you without meaning to." Oliver reached out, tentative, and rested his hand on my knee. The touch was gentle, grounding. "I'm scared of that too," he said, "but I'm more scared of going back to pretending." That landed in me like a vow. The next morning, the apartment looked the same. Same chipped mugs, same books on the shelf, same faint smear of winter light through the blinds. But Oliver looked different. Not because of clothes, because he'd changed back into jeans and a t-shirt before bed. Different, because he didn't look like he was bracing for impact. We made breakfast together. He cracked eggs into the pan and asked, "Can we do something today?" "Like what?" He hesitated, then said, "Can we go somewhere quiet? Somewhere we can talk without walls listening?" So we drove to a lakefront park where the wind made our eyes water and the path was half slick with ice. We walked with our hands in our pockets, shoulders bumped together. The city looked washed clean, gray-blue and honest. On a bench facing the water, Oliver said, "I don't know if I'll always want this. I don't know if it will change. I don't know if it means I'm gender fluid or just a guy who likes dresses sometimes." "You don't have to know right now," I told him. He nodded, staring at the lake like it might answer. "It just feels like when I wear feminine clothes, the noise in my head quiets. Like I'm not performing. Like I can be soft without being punished." I swallowed. "I want you to have that." He turned to me then. "And I want you to have what you asked for," he said. "I want you to feel chosen. I want you to feel wanted. I want us to stop waiting until something breaks to talk about it." I blinked hard against the wind and the tears that tried to rise. "We're going to mess up," I said, half laughing. "Probably," he agreed, and there was warmth in it. "But we'll mess up out loud." We sat there until our fingers went numb. When we finally stood, Oliver reached for my hand without hesitation, like he was done asking permission to be close. Later that week, we went to a thrift store on the north side, the kind with aisles that smelled like old perfume and fabric softener. Oliver kept his hood up at first, his shoulders tight. I didn't push. I just walked beside him, my hand hovering near his elbow like a quiet promise. We wandered past racks of denim and sweaters. Oliver's eyes kept drifting toward the dresses, then away again like looking too long might set off an alarm. I stopped by a rack of skirts and said casually, "I like this one." Oliver glanced, then realized what I was doing, creating a normal moment, a moment where he didn't have to be an exception. He swallowed. I I like that one, he said, pointing to a deep green skirt with soft pleats. Want to feel it? I asked. He reached out slowly, fingertips grazing the fabric. His shoulders dropped a fraction. Yeah, he whispered. Yeah, I do. We didn't buy anything that day, not because we couldn't, but because the victory was simpler. He touched the fabric in public and didn't flinch away from himself. On the drive home, he rested his head against the seat and said, "Thank you." For what? For not making me feel like I'm ruining your life. I gripped the steering wheel and let the truth settle. You're not, I said. You're making it real. That night, back in our apartment, Oliver took the box out from the back of the closet. He set it on the floor like it was an animal he'd been afraid to let out. Then he looked at me. "Are you ready?" he asked. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, palms open on my knees. "Yeah," I said, surprised to find that I meant it. "I am." He opened the box. Inside were folded pieces of fabric, carefully kept, a wig in a net, a pair of tights, a blouse with tiny buttons, a dress that looked like it had been worn once, maybe twice, a small makeup bag with drugstore brands and trembling hope. Oliver's hands hovered above it all, shaking. "I feel like I'm introducing you to someone I've been protecting," he whispered. I looked at him, and I understood what he meant. Not a different person. A hidden room in the same house. "You don't have to protect him from me," I said softly. "Or her. Or you." Oliver's eyes filled again, but this time the tears looked less like shame and more like relief. He sat down beside me and picked up the wig carefully, like it might be sacred. "I don't know what I want to be called when I'm like this," he admitted. "I've never let myself think about it." "We can take it slow," I said. He nodded. "Can we make one rule?" "Sure. No more boxes," he said, voice thick. "No more hiding. Not this. Not us." I reached for his hand and squeezed it. "No more boxes," I agreed. Later, when Oliver went to change, he left the bedroom door slightly open. The small gesture hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't about privacy. It was about trust. And while he was in there, I looked at the coffee table and saw the two chipped mugs from the night before, still sitting like witnesses. I realized something then. Love isn't just staying. Love is letting the other person evolve in front of you and choosing them again anyway. Love is asking the questions you're afraid will change the answers. When Oliver stepped back out, this time in a simple dress and the same flats, he didn't stop in the hallway. He walked all the way into the light. He looked at me, eyes bright and terrified and brave. "Okay," he said, voice trembling. "I'm here." And for the first time in years, I felt like we both were. I stood and crossed the room, heart pounding with the weight of everything we'd survived and everything we were finally willing to face. I took his hands in mine, felt the warmth of his fingers, the nervous pulse at his wrist. "I'm here too," I told him. Outside, the wind still pressed against the windows like it had opinions. The radiator still clanked. The world still wanted to keep things in neat categories. But inside our home, Oliver breathed like someone who'd stopped holding his breath. And I did too.